All right, it's time for the Week 8 recap. This is being recorded mere moments after the New York Yankees were eliminated, blowing a 5-0 lead to lose the World Series. But, you gotta get this important thing done if you're me. So here we are. We're gonna do this. Gonna power through. Okay, that's the key. Gonna power through. Um, the clock has also struck midnight. So happy Halloween to all of those who celebrate. Um, I'm not doing a week 8 headline. Here's your week 8 headline. It was National Tight End Week. Tight ends did well. The end. But we do have somebody who's going to join us, staying up into the late hours of the evening. Peter is going to join for the first portion of this. And I believe yes, he is here connecting to the audio. Peter is in, and Peter was on 1 year and 5 days ago. This is just beautifully poetic. He was on 1 year and 5 days ago when the Phillies were eliminated. And now here we are. He's on as the Yankees are eliminated tonight.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay. Um, can you tell me some things that you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, once they blew the lead, once they blew the 5-0 lead, you start preparing yourself for it to go poorly. Even when they even when they retook the lead, I didn't feel very good. You know, a real issue for them for years now, and it was a big issue tonight, was just an inability to come through in big spots. They had chances early to break the game open. They didn't get the devastating hit. Um, they had chances throughout the middle of the game. They had one late in the game, and they couldn't come through
Mhm.
with a big hit. I mean, they were very reliant on home runs. They got three early on, and then they just kind of died.
Yeah, I feel like the both teams had the bases loaded like all night.
Yeah.
Like if I was in your position, I'd be unable to form sentences from the amount of stress that you had to go through
Yeah, I
those
mean it's
hours.
just you're so used to it at this point with this team. They've been doing this for years. They've been doing this for years to their fans, and
I That fifth inning was insane.
it
I,
was it was one of the worst displays I've ever seen.
it's
It
crazy.
it
Six
it
out.
reminded yeah, it reminded me of something that the Abington Bombers would do.
Yes.
It reminded me of something that would just send Coach Spangenberg up a wall, just
Yes.
finding ways to keep shooting yourself in the foot.
Meanwhile, you know, every time they show Boone, just
He's,
munching on
he's,
sunflower seeds like a fucking squirrel on ecstasy.
he's
It's
the
so
same thing.
infuriating. He's
there,
just chomping on something. It's crazy.
there are two versions of Boone that you get. You get that one, and then you get the one that like randomly 5 to 10 times per year freaks out
Freaks
on an
out.
umpire. But like he loves freaking out like July 13th on a Wednesday afternoon game against Seattle.
Hmm.
He'll freak out for that game. And then in the postseason, there's like no emotion. And part of that might be trying to be even keeled, but there's a difference between being even keeled and being just like a robot. And he crosses that line sometimes. I'm very sickened by the fact that they wasted like what probably would have gone down as an all-time performance by Garrett Cole.
Yeah. I I was like yelling at the TV and they finally said it on the broadcast, but the pitching coach never came out. No
No,
one never came out. The only time they stopped play was when the infielders kind of came together. Like
yeah,
it was insane.
Rizzo,
He was just roasting out there.
and he deserves blame for that fifth inning
Sure.
not getting to the base, but they would have never even been there had Judge caught a routine line
That's
out.
crazy.
And Volpe, that's a tough play in the hole, but if he just sets his feet, he
Good
gets an out
time.
at
Yeah.
third.
Yeah.
He rushed it. Um and yeah, and then I mean, what a strange play there. Rizzo just like putting his head down, not even contemplating the fact that I might need to get to the bag. Um, I don't know. I mean, that was a comedy of mistakes. But then, what made that so fucked up was Cole gets those two strikeouts of Lux and Otani,
hmm
and you're thinking, wow,
It
like,
was awesome. He was pumping like 99, like dialing
yeah,
it up. Gets
is,
Otani.
is he gonna get them out of this? And then that bullshit infield single, if you even, it doesn't deserve to be called that, but that's what it was ruled as. And then Freeman just an absolute battle up there,
Yeah.
ends up winning it. And by the time it got to Hernandez, Cole, I mean, he had to be on fumes, and
Yeah.
he had missed his spots a few times. Um and he missed his spot to Freeman, he missed his spot against Hernandez, and they both made him pay.
The the MLB has the only playoffs where you can be up 5-0, dominating a game, and you're you're shitting yourself because the tying run is on deck and it's Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
Like baseball is slow and boring until
Yep.
it's dramatic and filled with tension. And then it's, just insane every
Yeah.
pitch.
Yeah, that's I mean, the reason it's so dramatic and tension filled is because of how slow it is. It's this
hmm
slow burn,
hmm
this build up, and then it just pops off. And it's there's a you and I love the sport, and even as crushing as it can be to you, when you play the sport, when you're a fan of the sport, you're going to see some real crushing things, but you also just have to appreciate the beauty of it, and what an amazing, just drama filled um, sport it can be, and it really delivered this month.
Yeah, like to think that the Yankees still would have had to win two more.
Yeah,
Like it felt like game seven, like it
it
just
it
has
did.
that importance with the big games in baseball.
That's part of why I'm not so
Yeah.
crushed too. Is I mean, they my I actually went to the game on Monday. I was there.
Oh, really?
Dylan was there. Dylan's cousin was there, and that was a shit show.
Yeah.
Um, I felt, I thought they had a pretty decent chance to win games 4 and 5,
hmm
because you have a bullpen game of game four, and then game five, you had Cole. But I didn't think they had much of a shot going back to Los Angeles facing Yamamoto. That was going to be the steepest hurdle to climb, and I mean, the chances of them rattling off two more, it would have been possible. You would have had all this momentum. Guys were starting to heat up, and, it would have been possible. But that's what, if you had lost a game seven in this fashion, you would have hated, everything. But what's tough to look back on for the series is they gagged two games away. You pissed away game one, you pissed away game five,
Yeah.
and that's the difference in a series. Can't
Yeah.
do that twice.
Um, Before I forget, the real just cap to that fifth inning was opening up Twitter and just seeing Dylan tweet cocksuckers at the Yankees was just so appropriate.
Dylan's had enough. Dylan, and I mean, I don't blame him. They have put fans like around mine and his age and younger. We were fortunate enough, Dylan and I were fortunate enough that we were like, you know, aware of things when they won in '09. But at 11 years old, quite,
You appreciate it.
you didn't get to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And by no means did you think this might be the last time they win for God knows how long. But we at least got to see one. You think about Yankees fans that are like 20 years old and younger, all they know is postseason pain.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just the way it goes. And hey, the Dodgers, they've had a ton of postseason pain,
Hmm.
and they finally got theirs. And uh, pretty amazing what they did with all the injuries they
Yeah.
had. So give them credit.
Earned it.
They absolutely did. But we'll turn the page now to fantasy football. And, with you being on, we will start with our matchup. And I win 133.94 to 107.92. We'll give the matchup MVP to, you know, Jaden Daniels on that Hail Mary to end up with 25 and a half points playing through an injury. I really didn't think he was going to play all week. And then when he got that limited session in Friday, it seemed like it was possible at that point that he would.
Hmm.
Um, he really gutted it out. And that Hail Mary, I mean, that's going to go down probably as the play of the NFL season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it determined a lot of fantasy matchups. It didn't determine ours or
Yes.
even the second matchup, but
Yeah.
there was a path. There was a path where if we both put in healthy claims for our defenses this week,
I know.
both of them, and had we made the opposite choices, that Hail
I
Mary
know.
would have determined the matchup. But
It's true. Yeah, it's a good point because it would have been about a 22, 23 point swing. And then, yes, that Hail Mary. And the crazy thing, too, about our matchup was it was completely done
yeah,
after that 425 slate. So that would have been, at that point, I would have been down, I don't know what, 3, 4 points. And then that
hmm
would have been
it
insane.
would, yeah,
Um, this just ended up being a really, really good week for my team. No
yeah,
spot scoring below 8.1.
good balance.
Yeah. Bijan Robinson scored for the third straight week. Ever since Andrew just, you know, took that victory lap, calling him a huge bust. He's been
Been great.
he's been amazing. And the pass catching is such a nice thing. And I don't think that's going away with Kirk. You have an immobile, aging quarterback. Um,
Hmm.
Checking down makes a ton of sense. So he's been great. Jamar Chase had a weird game where he
Yeah.
scored early.
Yep.
I think he had like 3 or 4 receptions on the opening drive and then pretty much didn't really do much else. That the Bengals offense as a whole really didn't do anything outside of that opening drive.
Yeah.
But you sit here, Chase he's the wide receiver one. Pretty wild for him to have 48 receptions on 59 targets for the season.
Hmm.
That efficiency is, and it's been all year. There hasn't been a game where he's had week 4. He had 3 catches on 6 targets. That was his least efficient game of the season.
Yeah, I feel like
Trey Mc, go ahead.
I feel like in recent history, he'll do that. Like
Yeah,
he'll have these big games and then he'll be efficient, not see the targets, and it it feels kind of weird to look at, but he has a way of making it work
Yeah, it's
compared to like
weird
Justin
that it
Jefferson
does.
across the aisle.
Exactly. I mean, most of those elite receivers do just get gaudy target
Yeah.
numbers, and Chase, it just has not been the case. Trey McBride, what a weird season this man has had. He doesn't have a receiving touchdown.
Yeah.
He's got 42 receptions. He really has delivered on what he was supposed to be,
Hmm.
except for the fact that he doesn't have the receiving. If he had even like three touchdowns, I think he'd probably be the tight end two behind Kittle.
Yeah.
I I, I think you could easily, I mean, obviously you could easily look at that and see if 18 points would get him there. I'd imagine it would. He also missed the game too, and he's still the tight end five. So um he's been great.
Yeah. Have to be happy with that.
James Conner, he really struggled. But he scored. They were doing everything they could to stop him. I watched some of that. Like there were situations, short yardage situations. They were just bringing fucking everybody to stop the run, and
Mm.
they were able to. But he still got the job done because he got 22 touches and was able to get into the end zone. Um, and then yeah, I mean Brian Thomas, uh, he ends up getting injured on his touchdown reception.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been so
Four,
good.
he's
He's
been. I mean,
he's such a
he's the
fun
wide
watch
receiver
too.
five. He is. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
He's up to the wide receiver five now, and it's been just wild when you look at the guy has 5 games at six or less targets. Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
How he does it.
Mentioning Chase's efficiency, like Thomas is even more efficient.
Does that
Um,
concern you? Or do you think it's like room to grow?
yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. You could look at it both of those ways. You could look at it and say, why isn't he demanding more targets, right? Like commanding. Why is he not
Mhm.
getting more targets? Uh, and you could look at that and say, is there maybe a problem here? Um, or is it the other side of it and saying eventually they're going to come, and now Christian Kirk is out for the season,
Right.
so it seems like he might miss this week with this chest injury. He was limited on Wednesday, so that's promising. But I mean, they should be smart with the guy. So maybe he misses a week, but he definitely dodged. It's very similar to the Jaden Daniels thing. Both of them are rib issues, and uh, both of them, dodged a potential. You end up breaking your ribs, you're going to miss a month. So
Yeah.
they at least avoided that, both of them.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see with Thomas. I mean, as he's able to move back into my flex spot once Nico
Hmm.
Collins returns. I mean, you feel really good about a guy like this in your flex. And Chuba Hubbard, we don't know. What's he going to be the rest of the year? I don't know. He's done an admirable job for a while here when I needed him. You know what? He reminds me of a guy you had when uh, the year you won the league and Eckler went down
Hmm.
and you picked up that fucking backup. What was his name?
Is that
His name.
that Ballard?
No, the Chargers backup.
Uh, yeah, he like
God,
he, like scored every week. It was awesome.
yes, yes. Yeah, I'm trying to. I mean, I got to look this up now. The 20 would have been the 2020
2020.
Chargers.
Yeah.
I feel like he ended up going to Pittsburgh or something. Kalen Balaj.
Oh, Balaj. All right, I was close.
Yeah, you were. You said Ballard. You were close. Yeah, Kalen
Mhm.
Balaj just like
Yeah,
randomly, admirably filled in, and you need those
you
guys. You
do.
need that.
Hmm.
Hubbard has also legitimately been good. He's averaging 5 yards per carry.
Yeah.
in a bad offense.
Yeah. Horrible.
So
Yeah. I mean,
he's done a nice job.
this week was a good testament to the balance that your team has that not a lot of teams can claim, myself included.
Yeah, I can win in different ways, and
Hmm.
that's what gives me hope. I just want to,
Hmm.
before we move to you, point out Alexander Madison, um, 14 carries for 15 yards
Oh,
this this week.
it's
He is horrendous, but
the Kansas City front is also
it's amazing.
ferocious.
Yeah, it's amazing how good they've been against the run. But yeah, I mean, that's just funny to see. Like,
Worth calling out. Yeah.
he's also averaging 3.2 per carry. They're a travesty, that Raiders team.
Yeah, they don't have much left.
No, no. I don't know what they're gonna end up doing. But yeah, this goes down as a good week, and it was an important week for me because um, facing you, I knew if I beat you that I'd be in the position to hold the second bye
Yeah.
after this week. And speaking of bye, I have bye weeks looming, so I want to be able to get myself in as good of a position as I can before those just crush me a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yep.
shift over to you, and you got to start with Jalen Hurts, who's doing his best Mike Tolbert impression these
Yeah.
days. Um, I mean, it's become insane. It's insane what he is, because there was a time when like he was a legitimately explosive runner, and now that's just gone. Now he's just a goal line back, basically.
Yeah, it's strange. It's been strange to experience. Um, and like you watch him keep the ball and like every time he does, you're still like a little hopeful that
Yeah,
he's got something in the tank and it's weird. I don't know what to make of it, but he's found ways to make himself an efficient quarterback the last several weeks. I mean, he doesn't have a pick the
yeah,
last 3 games.
and
Um,
that's a big thing for him. The
yeah,
turnovers were getting out of hand, dating back to last year,
yeah,
and he had what do we have here? 7 through 4 games this year, and now none the last three. It's
hmm
big.
makes a big difference. Yeah.
Huge for real life and fantasy. You don't want to be losing
Yes.
like 4 points a week to that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the rushing touchdowns they've been out of hand the last few weeks, 5 the last 2 weeks. That's not going to continue. But the fact that they've gone back to doing that at all
Hmm.
is a nice sign, because they had stopped doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
um, and Barkley had a couple of chances inside the 5. He didn't cash them in.
Hmm.
And then they went to Hurts, and it worked well. So
I think they did
he,
I might be misremembering, but I feel like they did 3 tush pushes in a row
I believe
on
they did.
one of the goal line,
I believe they did. Yeah,
which is
yeah,
just comical. But
it is. It is. But hey,
that's part of why you draft the guy.
yeah. Oh well, except for
With them.
fantasy, like he's still. You could set aside Lamar and then probably Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen. Outside of those three guys, I still think Hurts is the next one that you want right now,
Yeah.
because of the rushing touchdown opportunity.
Hmm.
I don't know who else you would even Baker obviously has been there. Is that going to continue?
Yeah, hard to say.
I mean, he needs to. The only way that continues is if he keeps up. He's on a crazy passing touchdown pace.
Hmm.
Like he's pacing for like a 45 touchdown season.
Yeah. Well, he is not slowed down with the interceptions, that's for sure. He's caught
No,
7 the last 3 weeks, and he scored above 25 points in each of those weeks, which is nuts.
he's just been an absolute gunslinger.
Yeah.
And to do it this past week without Godwin and Evans is pretty
Hmm.
wild. They were down in that game, so I think he threw it like 55 times or something.
Yeah, it was a
Uh,
lot. And 7 of those went to Bucky Irving, which was a nice
yeah,
development.
yeah, that was actually that was starting to piss me off a little bit because that just has had not been part of his like the Jalen Hurts touchdowns. You could be annoyed by them, but like that's been part of him for as long as he's been in the NFL. But Bucky Irving with 7 receptions when he came in with 13 on the season is wild. And
Yeah.
hey, they've got they're without their top 2 receivers, so there are targets to go around,
Yep.
and some of them might end up going to Irving. And he quietly now, 4 of his last 5 weeks in double digits.
Yeah, solid.
He just did, yeah. He's just this reliable running back too. You'd like to see the carries come up, like only
Hmm.
one game above 10 rushing attempts,
Hmm.
and maybe that will at some point. Like he's averaging 5.2 a carry. I think it's weird that they aren't using him more, but White has his role. He does the things he does well. He does very well.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, and that team, they're not they just haven't been built to run the ball in years.
Yeah, there's some weirdness too, where they'll be in like lopsided games. Um, like Sean Tucker, they just decided to give him the ball a million
Yeah,
times
yeah.
when White was out. So, but it has seemed like every week he ends up with like, 10 carries for 50 some yards and
Mm-hmm.
ends up with 10 carries for 30 to 40 yards.
Yeah, pretty much. Your 2 studs had, very solid games. Both of them disappointed in the sense that neither went off, but these were like floor performances. Derrick Henry only gets 11 carries, which is
Hmm.
just malpractice by
Strange.
them.
Yeah, very strange in a close game.
He
Um,
did find his way. He scored late, I think.
yes, he did. Yep. Yeah,
Uh,
he had their last TD that put them up before Jameis had his bomb.
yeah, yeah. So, Henry, you can't say enough about what he has been. Like all of the dreams of what, could have been envisioned for him this season. He's been that and more.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously more than I could have imagined, even with all the tailwinds that I
Yeah.
was banking on. This has been a different team for me to own and one that's been fun to own with just like high ceiling guys and
Hmm.
um, kind of the the reward, the payoff of like waiting on Bucky and Bigsby and
Yep.
having them turn into contributors has been fun. And honestly, this was a when I look back at it, it was a pretty balanced performance.
Yeah. I
Two
mean,
on
this was
this
a
team,
this was a fine week.
I got 0 from 2 positions.
Exactly. Yeah. Cooper and the Vikings defense special teams combined for point 0.12.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's really hard to overcome. So yeah, I mean that really this was you had a great performance from Hurts, solid from Henry Jefferson. Jefferson's did end up being annoying in the sense that he had like 6 for 80 with
Yeah.
10 minutes to go in the second quarter,
Yeah.
and then nothing. He
Yeah.
had one more Herculean catch along the
Hmm.
sideline,
Yeah,
Um,
it gave me a bad feeling about the week too because I
yeah.
missed all of that like first quarter good stuff, and then I watched most of the rest of the game, like hardly saw anything, and then just like had to watch the Minnesota defense get picked apart, which in retrospect, in real time was a bad decision with Cup and Puka both coming back.
Yeah, that was a tough one. And it's funny watching from the second quarter onward, I would imagine you watched your team lose points. Like between Jefferson really not doing anything the rest of the way and how much the Vikings unit lost, you
Yeah,
probably
probably a good assumption.
it was probably a net negative that you
Yeah,
experienced
I think you're
from your
right.
team.
Yeah,
Um, I know for a fact that you had a net negative after halftime.
for sure.
Uh,
For sure.
yeah, the Vikings thing was weird because, like you mentioned already, I was in on them too. Uh, and really, what it was about was hope. Like, I was hopeful that they would get sacks against Stafford,
Hmm.
and like the Rams line is shoddy.
Yeah, banged up.
Stafford is old, and I thought if you could get like look at the Vikings, they've had 3+ sacks in all but 2 games. I thought like if you could get 4 or 5 sacks in this, even if they give up points and yards, let's say you end up with 4 sacks, you end up with a turnover, like they're still going to get you six,
Hmm.
5, 6. And that was my hope. And then they've got this gorgeous schedule, which sadly it's
Right.
not quite as attractive with the Colts with Flacco starting,
Yep.
but still you have Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago. Like
Yeah. That's why I
that
was
was my
willing to pay
that
for them.
exactly. I mean, you and I were seeing it the same way. Um, you kind of and that's a balancing act with defense and special teams, I feel like, is do you want to go with that unit that you feel like is going to give you a great 1 week, or do you want to maybe try to balance it where you could get somebody who's going to last you a month?
Yeah.
And that's the strategy of that spot. But it didn't work out for you, and it is what it is. Cooper was a weird one. I don't think he played all that much.
Yeah, I don't know. And
He played 50% of snaps.
he didn't really practice today either. So I don't know if that factored into it at all. I don't know.
Possible.
I think I have like three too many Buffalo Bills, quite honestly, because Krieger was really good on the bench, and he's been really good all year, and I've yet to play him, and
Yeah.
I just don't totally know what to do.
Well, Shakir's a weird one because he's just that like he's like the low ceiling, and
Yeah,
it's weird it's very hard to start him over Cooper.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's a difficult one, and it's also kind of weird starting Kincaid and Shakir together because they've both kind of been used in the same like underneath.
yeah. Area of the field.
What a disappointment that's been for Kincaid. I don't understand why that's his role.
Yeah, it is, and it's not like Dawson Knox has been much of a thing.
No, and he shouldn't be. I mean, not
Yeah, and
Kincaid. We've seen like this isn't just some invented thing. Like he was awesome last year,
hmm.
and he had a great collegiate profile. I I really part of it is the Bills. They're happy to like they don't want to be throwing it downfield. That's just kind of how they've been since the middle of last year.
Yeah,
And with
that's true.
Kincaid, your hope is that touchdowns start to come. He had the one this week
Hmm.
because that's the only way he's going to pan out
Yeah,
when he's catching these worthless targets. Um, he needs to score, and he only has 2 on the season. That's why he's been a disappointment.
yeah, yeah. I've got some figuring out to do on my team a little bit. It's kind of tricky, I've been out there a little bit, but like it's for one, I think it's tough to value Bucky and Bigsby
It
um,
is.
for both myself and on the trade market. Like, I don't know how much to
Yeah.
value them or how others will value them. And it's like, it's a little bit of like, do I wait for their situations to pan out? Like, I would love an ETN trade this week,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And do I try to fill out the team around my high ceiling guys and like feel like I have a more sure thing starting lineup, or do I, um, like I don't think it's the right idea to flip one of those guys for a more balanced lineup, but and I've got this two QB situation, so I don't know. I've been trying to toss things around, but just haven't gotten anything to stick, and I don't. Maybe I don't need to. Maybe the team is what it is, but and maybe I'll luck out, but that's not always the best plan.
Yeah, I mean it is weird with those two guys, and it with Irving, White's never going to just go away. And it's because he brings that pass catching skill set. Like it would be one thing if Irving was just a superior version of the same player. That's not the case.
Hmm.
Like Irving is the better pure runner, but White brings things to the table that Irving doesn't. And White's the veteran, and he's been steady for them for years. And so he's not just going to disappear this year. And that makes it complicated with Irving. And then with Bigsby, I mean, I guess it's kind of similar where it would be weird for them to just hand over the reins. Like Bigsby has been so far superior to
Yeah.
ETN this year. But is it fair to just ETN was a good player just last year?
Yeah. Really good.
Um, Frankly, I don't know what the hell has happened to him. I don't know if he's been playing hurt or what, but it's strange the drop off. Yeah, those are weird situations with those guys. I think what you got to feel good about is that um, they've established a pretty solid floor for themselves, and they're an injury or something away from being able to really take off. We've seen that from Bigsby when he's gotten his chance to lead that backfield. He's had a couple of huge games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you also have to look at this and say I've essentially gotten nothing out of Amari Cooper.
Hmm.
I've gotten aggravation out of DK Metcalf, who has half the time been awful. Like you're looking at, including this past week that he missed, 4 of his 8 weeks, he's given you 6.3 or less points. But he's also given some big weeks. So there's more to your team. Your team's been good as is. Third in point. You're third in everything, basically. Third in points, third best record, third in record if everyone faced everyone each week, and you still have more. There's more to get
In the
out of this
tank.
group.
Yeah.
Even if Henry might regress a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, I mean, like he shouldn't score. You don't think that he's going to score 25 touchdowns this season. Maybe he will. I
It
said I
might.
said it last week or 2 weeks ago. Like maybe he just will do that. But um, realistically, even if he comes down, maybe he averages instead of 21, maybe he averages like 16 points per game the rest of the way. Um, he's still going to be very strong. Jefferson feel like there could be more from him. He's only had 2 games above 100 yards receiving.
Yeah, he's
I
been
think
so
there's more in
steady.
the tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's yet to have one of his just like
Like crazy,
patented yes,
like 200 yards, two
and
TD.
he will do that. Like that's going to come at some point. They start to face some weaker teams now too. That's not like look at the schedule they've faced.
Yeah.
San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, Detroit. Like they've been facing some of the best teams in the NFL. Um, and that starts to soften up now. So yeah, I mean, I think you got to feel like you're in a pretty good spot, and this was, by all accounts, the second and third best teams in the league facing off, and both of us had respectable weeks outside of truly two spots on your team.
Yeah. I think that's a fair
Um,
assessment.
it's 12:45, so you're not going to be on for the whole thing. You're not going to be able to make it until the end. So if you'd like to give power rankings now, or just any thoughts that you have on things around the league, feel free.
Sure, I'm looking at the standings. To me, it feels like a clear top two with you
Yeah.
and Nothdurft. It feels like a pretty clear 3 and 4 still with Klingman and I.
I'll tell you what, I think a third team has jumped into that tier in Larar.
I think so too. I mean,
It, the
he
Diggs
finds a
injury hurts bad,
hurts. Yeah, he
but
his
should be getting McCaffrey back.
yeah, his thing to figure out. If he gets McCaffrey back, he's got four good
Hmm.
running backs, um,
Yeah.
and one wide receiver. So it's going to be
Yeah.
on him to trade one of those
And
running backs for a wide receiver, and that's just the unknown. That's the question mark. I don't know if he
and
will.
that one receiver, as you well know, is like maybe the most infuriating guy to own over the last couple of years in T. Higgins.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't. How does this keep happening with T. Higgins? These just like out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere injuries.
Insane.
It's so ridiculous. I couldn't believe it when I saw like last Thursday or Friday, whenever it was. It was like T. Higgins is in real jeopardy of missing this game. Like he
Yeah,
was on a roll. He was just starting to get going.
yeah. I know. I know.
They should
I,
stop practicing him. Like he fucking gets injured and he didn't practice today.
yeah, I'm just out on him as
And
as
no one
as
can blame
owners
you.
tend to be when they go through. Everyone's got those guys that they just won't
Yep,
won't
you
dip
just
back
can't.
into.
Andrew
Um,
has many of those guys.
yes, he does, seemingly more than anyone.
Yes,
Yes, we'll see what Larar does. I mean, he needs the quarterback situation to resolve
it's
too, and it's just
insane.
he should trade with me, honestly. I could give him DK and a quarterback and get like Joe Mixon or something.
It's actually, I mean, it's really a pretty good idea.
Yeah, but an idea is one thing, an action is another.
Hmm. Yeah,
But yeah, Laura's knocking on the door. I agree. That middle area um, is Krieger
yeah,
and Andrew, and I think Horvath
I agree.
is solid enough. He's got really good running backs. Um,
He benefited from that trade.
yeah,
That that's going to end up being a
it
good one for him, I think.
yeah, like I I look at this bottom tier and like Dylan's definitely in that bottom tier now. Like there's no way
I
around
think
it.
so. Yeah.
It's him, Sam, um, Lohan's been discussed extensively on this podcast, um, and Matt and Mecca.
Yeah. The thing, Mecca's team is interesting because he truly is like hitting on a running back away from being right there with the rest of that middle.
Yeah, he's
Um,
grinding.
it just,
Grinding.
is it going to happen for him? I mean, he also might have unlocked with Cedric Tillman and or Jawan Jennings, he may end up being able to make a trade for a running back.
Mhm.
You look at like a team like Krieger, who is loaded with usable. Well, he's not really loaded because he's going to lose Jordan Mason now, but he's got four running backs that are. You know what? I actually take back what I was going to say because I don't really believe in Javonte Williams, but Javonte Williams would still be an
Is
improvement
that kind of guy.
on what Matt has.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Um, Speaking of which, we should. Did they did um yeah, okay, so Matt Nordhoff and Krieger just made that pretty big
Yeah,
trade
yeah,
on Saturday.
yeah,
That we didn't that kind of went under the radar.
yeah. We could quickly cover that one. My initial reaction to that was really liked it for Krieger. I I understood it for Nordiff because he was sitting in a spot where his receiving group had so much uncertainty. So the way you're looking at it, if you're Nordiff, I think is I'm getting a
Mhm.
wide receiver who I like in Pickens, and I'm getting a usable running back in Stevenson. Um,
Hmm.
and to me, if that's the way he looked at it, I get that. I just I've kind of come to a point with fantasy football trades where it's like I don't ever want to be giving up the best player in the deal
Hmm.
unless I absolutely like
You're
need
pressed
depth.
too.
Like think about that
Yeah.
trade Krieger and I made. Like Krieger, but
Yeah.
basically his season was going to end unless he traded his best player. That was the last move he had
Hmm.
was trade my best player to restock my team.
Hmm.
Nordiff was not at that level of desperation where he needed to trade the best player in the deal.
Yeah.
And is Pickens going to be that much better than Keon Coleman?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean you know, it looked awesome after the first week with Russ. And
Yeah,
I know there was some goofy stuff that happened against the
yeah.
Giants too with
He
him.
could have had another monster game.
Yeah. So
Very he was inches away.
maybe it is there. But it's a maybe, And to your point from last week's pod, both things that you speculated on, Deontay Johnson getting traded and Anthony Richardson getting benched, both happened. And so now he
Yeah,
might have more decision making on his hands. Like
yeah. That
I'm probably playing Josh Downs over Pickens,
I think so.
you know.
The
Like he's been
Pickens is
so
interest.
good.
Josh Downs is.
He's
I
just a
mean,
good player.
he's very good. And as much as I love Michael Pittman and think he's great, Downs is better than Pittman at this point.
Yeah.
Uh, Downs has you know 9+ targets 4 of his last 5 games. That doesn't happen by accident. That's elite stuff from him. And Downs this past week made one of the best catches I've ever seen by a Colt. Um, it was incredible. It ended up he was originally it was called a touchdown, and then he had clearly landed down at about the 1.5 yard line, but it's just an incredible leaping grab on a ball that was overthrown, and he hauled it in.
Hmm.
He's yeah, it's the nice thing with Pickens to finish on him is they've got some promising matchups. So they go on bye now. So Nordiff actually has no decision this week,
Hmm.
but they face Washington, who you can throw on. They face Baltimore, who you can throw on. Uh,
Yeah.
they have some. They have Cincinnati in week
Cincinnati.
13. So there are some definite spots there. and maybe it works out, but I just thought if I was Nord, if I would have kept the three running backs together, Williams, Montgomery, Kamara, and would have said, I've got three borderline top 10 running backs. I've got Garrett Wilson, who is somehow working out, and I'm going to find a way. I'm just going to keep finding a way to fill in that wide receiver two spot. Um, how do you feel about the Deontay Johnson trade? Do you think that that benefits him or hurts him or maybe neutral?
I I think if it benefits him, it's marginally. I don't know. It's just the Ravens and wide receivers and how much is there to go around, you
Yeah.
know, at the end of the day. It helps the
Yeah.
Ravens as a football team,
Yes.
but
Yeah. I view it similarly. Like, um, there are going to be games where he gets like four targets now.
yeah,
There will
yeah.
be games where he performs, but it sucks when you look at some of the like there were spots he could have ended up where it would
Hmm.
have been like let's say he ended up with the Chargers. That kind of comes to mind for me. That would have been awesome. Herbert would have just peppered him.
Yeah,
Um, the only good thing that comes out of it, well, it's kind of two good things built into one. It should help Lamar, which helps Nordif. And whenever you decide to start Johnson, he has that built-in stack now.
hmm,
So that's nice.
yeah. I don't. He probably won't ever need to start him. I don't know. Would you rather play Sutton?
No. Sutton
Sutton.
would need to really um
He's he's kind of
he would
okay.
need
I don't know.
he I know he weirdly has been like despite
He's a
it makes
guy.
no it makes no sense that he has been okay when you look at he has one game above 70 yards and two touchdowns on the entire year. Um
I know.
he's just you don't ever feel good about starting him
I know you've
because
owned him
he's low
recently.
ceiling, low floor.
I've had him in a dynasty for 3 years now, and this is just he just finds a way to score points,
Yeah.
and he's kind of been the same thing every year. Where like
The
if you put him in there and forget about him, like he comes up with decent games.
The only
But
thing that was different last year was just how ridiculous. Like he scored every week
a
last year
ton,
for a
yeah,
while.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, maybe as Bo Nix improves,
maybe.
maybe maybe Sutton becomes more stable. But it's hard for me to ever want to start a guy who half the time is scoring under 6 points and then has not one time given you 15 plus. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a horrible like I probably would rather take my chance with Jamison Williams if he ever fucking gets his life back on track. He,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the
he got
thing. Like,
arrested this week.
oh, additionally,
I think he did. I think
he
I
just
saw that he
decided
got arrested.
to.
Yeah, he's just tail spinning now.
He just thought like all bets were off because he's suspended. Just
Yes, yeah, I can just do
just didn't
whatever I
matter.
want now. Let's see what happened with him. Yeah, he was arrested. Gun was found underneath his seat on the passenger side. I mean, I don't know.
Sure it was.
He's just a clown.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who's just kind of constantly in trouble.
Yeah. Would just be in prison if he could not
pretty,
catch a
pretty
football
much,
and run really fast. It's just
pretty much.
there are those guys.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, like Nordif, and you mentioned it, like he's gonna have so many just not fun start sit decisions now, like
Oh yeah.
weekly, trying to decide between his wide receiver two and flex on a weekly basis is going to be awful.
So I was about
Because
to say, like, I just worry that the right players are going to be left on the bench at the wrong time with this team.
yeah,
Just looking at the collection of guys.
and that's the double-edged sword of depth.
Yeah.
Look what's happened to Lohan. Like he's a couple of start sit decisions away from being like 8-8 instead of 4-12.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the way it goes. That's what was going on with me early in the season too. I made a couple of wrong calls. I could be like 13-3, 14-2 right now if I made a couple of decisions differently. And it's not a good time when you have to, because ultimately these decisions are basically impossible to make. Like you could analyze shit all you want. There's no accounting for who's going to score a touchdown in a given week, really. That's
Mhm.
not a very predictable thing.
True.
And then that ends up being the difference often. But yeah, I mean, it's a trade that I understand why Nothdurft did it, but just wouldn't have wanted to give up. When you have a great team, I wouldn't have wanted to give up the best player.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he was hearing the chatter from the pod over the
Yeah, and
last month.
and probably the chatter from Krieger, who was probably just beating him into a fucking pulp with trade offers, if I have to guess. Um, Krieger's team is, man, I mean, who does he start now that he originally drafted? Jacobs and McLaurin? Is that it? I believe so. I guess Rashad White some weeks.
He's not playing him ever again.
It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's the squad.
wild how just
I was kind of playing this week.
what a facelift this team
Uh,
has had.
Javonte Williams, he had to.
Yeah, big Javante.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not have. Well, Javante had that spot against Carolina, but
Yeah. I don't know.
I probably would have started Kamara, just traded for him. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's we've had some big trades. I mean, we've
Yeah.
had what, three trades of like 5+ players,
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your brain around when they happen, honestly.
It's wild too because like half the league basically is not, you can't trade with half the league. So for this somehow to have happened, that
Yeah,
Dylan Horvath trade is one of the most random things that's happened in league history.
it is, especially
It,
with the main player in that trade being who it was.
yes, I mean it's yeah, that was a wild one, and we'll see how all of these trades age. They're going to need some time before they settle. But is there anything else you would like to say before you depart for the evening?
Nope, I'll let you continue on your way. I hope this is a cathartic exercise for you as it was for me last year. And,
It's a good distraction.
yeah, just try to get some sleep tonight.
Eh, I'm probably not going to, just
I
because
know.
I have to be awake at like 7 a.m. anyway. So by
Yeah.
the time this is done and distributed, it's going to be 4, and then going to be raring to go. But yeah, the Yankees thing, I'm not nearly as shattered. The moment that changed me forever, irrevocably, was or that fucking Altuve walk off Chapman. I've never been the same
Mm,
since.
mm,
Nothing has gotten to me.
yeah.
Um, Nothing has gotten to me the same after that. That just, I don't know.
So
Something
you're
about that.
you're telling me your expectations were low for Mark Leiter at the end of tonight.
Mark Leiter. Yeah, hey, it's funny. He ended up being pretty respectable in the playoffs after he was terrible in the
Yeah.
regular season. It sucks that Canely didn't have it tonight because that was a guy who, I mean, he was awesome all postseason, and
Yeah.
eventually, as a reliever, you're just not going to have it. And he picked the worst night possible, and I hate that
He's
for him.
he struggled elsewhere in the series, didn't he? Like this. I mean, every time he steps on the mound, it's just like fucking John Smoltz talking about his changeups.
Yeah,
It drives me
he
crazy.
he got himself in some trouble, but like he always kind of he and or uh Weaver coming in wiggled out of it,
Yeah.
so it ended up okay. This was the first time where it came back to bite them. Um,
Yeah.
Weaver, by the way, too, was there was no way he had more to give later in this series.
Yeah.
He probably, if this went seven, he would have gotten rocked in Los Angeles. I think they overused him so badly, but they kind of had to.
Yeah, that third disengagement was a good indicator of where
Yeah, where his
the
mind
space he was
was.
in. Yeah.
And I mean, you just got to ask yourself why he pitched on Monday, um, in the ninth inning of a game you're down 4-0. Like that's
Yeah.
the difference right there between Boone and Roberts in this series was
Yeah.
Roberts knew enough last night to punt
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
save himself, and Boone just he managed on Monday. I get it in a sense of you don't want to go down 3-0, but you have to start realizing like, well, we're going to lose. And so now we need to just we need to be completely built up for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
You don't need to be wasting Luke Weaver in a 4-0 game so that now when you needed him and Canely tonight, they were both shot.
Yeah.
But they didn't lose this series because of Aaron Boone. I mean, they lost game one maybe because of Aaron Boone, but they
Yeah. I mean,
lost.
what did you think of Nestor?
I mean,
My
that
my
was one of the
jaw
worst
was
decisions I've ever seen.
my jaw was dropped when I saw him warm up. I
I
especially I forgot that they hadn't used Tyler Hill yet too.
Tim Hill.
Tim Hill.
Yeah, I know. It made no sense. I mean, Tim Hill has been amazing since they acquired him in June,
Yeah.
and Nestor hasn't pitched in 6 weeks, and you bring him into just like
And he's a
one of
starter.
the highest leverage situations
Yeah.
ever,
He's not
ever.
a
Yeah, he's a
relief pitcher.
starter, and you bring
Yeah.
him in to face three straight Hall of Famers.
Yeah. It's it sounds preposterous when you put it that way. Through two pitches. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the other absurdity of the series was the fan interference.
Oh, that
And
great man.
I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And
I mean,
to have the icing on the cake be that of all people, Gronk
Gronkowski.
knew who he
Yes.
was is it just feels like a simulation.
Yeah, Gronkowski saying like, yeah, like he was a sicko back in college. Like,
Yeah.
what are we? That man and I was pretty dead inside at the moment that
Sure, it was
happened
two
because
nothing. Yeah.
Freeman had hit yet another
Oh,
home run,
you
and
you you have to be just so sick of seeing that guy's mouth agape, just
the
like yelling, because that's just his reaction every time.
yelling and like that flex, that like awkward flex he does as he's about to round third base on those home
And
runs.
he's just got like the biggest fucking teeth. This drives you crazy.
So he had done that. I had
Yeah,
just kind of resigned myself to like, wow, this
yeah.
is going to be an ugly, like they're done. They're going to get
Come on.
swept. This is going to be brutal. And then just truly one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen, mainly because that is the most stereotypical Yankees
Yeah.
fan ever. Like just New York trash, like just a schmuck of a
Mhm.
person. And he fucking that that slow-mo of him with his fucking double chin, rip prying the glove open and like something out of like fucking beer pong, like scooping the ball out of Betts's glove with backspin to flip it out was I couldn't help but even in the state I was in just laugh. That was hilarious.
And like getting the announcers live reaction to the
Yeah,
replay.
Joe Davis.
I just didn't know what to say.
Smoltz was disgusted, but Joe Davis
Yeah,
thought it was fucking hilarious.
yeah.
And then
Right where it's doing.
the other part of that was amazing was after the umpires and like those other like security staff people came over, those guys were like pleading their case. They were
Mhm.
like they were like signaling like he
Yeah, it's
crossed
like this
over
is
into
our
our
space.
this is our area. What? What are you fucking talking about?
Uh,
That was awesome. Yeah, I mean, sadly for the Yankees, that was the best moment of the entire series.
yeah, yeah. All right, those were my
All
parting
right.
words. I'll let
All
you
right. Take
continue.
care.
Thanks for letting me join. See ya.
Absolutely. Happy to have you on. See ya. Good to have Peter on and talk about some baseball. I know that there are plenty of you guys in here who could not care less about the Yankees or the World Series. And, I don't blame you if you zoom right past um, some of that discussion. I won't hold it against you if you do. We'll get back to fantasy football now. We'll get back on track. I'm going to go pretty quickly, quicker than I normally do because this has already taken some time. And I still have 5 matchups. So we've got Andrew just exploding for a 172.01 to 123.81 victory over Larar. And no exaggeration, one of the best performances in league history from Andrew. I texted him this. If we were still a full PPR league, this is a 190-point week. I did, the math. His team had like 40 receptions or some shit. So tack on another 18 or 19 points it was. Andrew would have cracked 190 if we were still full PPR. Remarkable performance, and remarkable when you consider the fact that nobody over 33.1, only one over 26.8. It's not like he had like a 50-point explosion. It's not like he had ridiculous output out of DST and kicker. He gets about 17 combined. This was just everybody delivering. And it starts with matchup and weekly MVP CD Lamb, 33.1 points. He was force fed late in this game against San Francisco, and he was just incredible. And here we go with CD, 31 targets over his last 2 games. That represents almost half of his season total, and he really is heating up, as you knew he would as the season went onward. So Andrew should feel great about him. Devontae Smith responded, scoring on a bomb touchdown. You still don't love his role because it does feel very um, it feels low ceiling. The nice thing with him is he at least has the high floor. He's scored in double digits all but 1 week. And then, the big stuff from Andrew was getting production out of 2 spots that were big question marks coming into the week. Running back 2, Tyrone Tracy, 22 points, 20 for 145 against a really good Steelers defense. Andrew should feel good about Tracy. Now he has a concussion, probably misses this week if I had to guess, but Andrew might have a running back 2 solidified when that seemed like it might be a black hole. That is a big deal for this team. And how about Calvin Ridley? In his first game after the Hopkins trade, he gets a season high 15 targets. catches 10 of them for 143 yards. And here we go. You can feel some hope that with Hopkins gone, Ridley might just get fed. I mean, I'm not sold on it completely because Ridley has done this the last couple of years where you get these big games out of him and then he disappears and then you get a big game and he gets you to buy back in, then he disappears. But at least there's hope. Whereas before this week, Ridley was close to being a drop candidate. Tucker Kraft had another good game. He's up to the tight end 3 on the season, one of the best pickups of the year. And the two Bills really delivered. Allen and Cook combining for about 50. Cook ran it in twice. It's been the big thing for him. I've said it a few times on here. Big difference for him this year is the touchdowns. He's got 8. He came into the season with like 6 in his 2-year career, 8 already this year. And then Josh Allen just continues to be so efficient. He did sadly throw his first interception of the year, but Allen's been impressive and is the quarterback for, despite the fact that he has taken a step back as a runner, only 3 rushing touchdowns, largely because it's James Cook who's been taking those in. So Allen's still getting the job done. And Mark Andrews scored again on the bench. Targets are still low. He still is yet to top 5 targets in any game, but he's got his red zone roll back, and that's a big deal. He's a guy that you can at least feel comfortable using. It's amazing. He's up to the tight end 8 on the season. That happened so swiftly for him. Ladd McConkey had a big game as well on the bench, and he might be growing into a bigger role as the season goes on in his rookie year. So just a fantastic week for Andrew. And for this to happen after the roof had kind of caved in on him, 3 of the previous 4 weeks scoring in the 70s, to have a 100-point turnaround is remarkable. And I know he feels much differently about his team than he did a week ago. And who could blame him? This was about as good as it gets. Looking for consistency now. That's going to be the key for this team to take that next step into being in contention. Right now, it's on the fringe of that. Larar ends up losing here. Wasn't a bad week for his team. He just ran into a buzzsaw. And most of the guys performed. The only ones who really didn't really was only Keenan Allen who didn't perform. He's been terrible. He's scored over 4.9 points once. Both injuries and ineffectiveness have hampered him to a wide receiver 78 standing. Just not a guy that you could probably ever trust to start unless one of Odunze or DJ Moore goes down. Stephon Diggs ends up lost for the season, and that is brutal for this team because it was already weak at receiver. Peter and I talked about this. Already weak at receiver, now really bad at the position because Diggs was that floor. You had Diggs as a floor guy, and you had Higgins as more of your boom bust. It hurts. It hurts to lose Diggs. Larar's going to have to try to find a way to replace him. But the rest of the team, great. Just great news. Mixon keeps on rolling. Only trails Derrick Henry in points per game at the running back position. And if you look at his 4 full games, 21.4 or more in all of them. He's been amazing. Touchdown machine. And in all 4 of those games, he's rushed for over 100 yards. He is the backbone of the Texans offense with Colin sidelined. J.K. Dobbins found the end zone, still very inefficient, but he has scored 2 of the last 3 weeks, and that's allowed him to stay, in a good spot for fantasy purposes. Najee Harris had another strong game. He's really coming on. He's a guy that I long have not really believed in, and 3 straight 100-yard games. He's averaging about 4.5 per carry on the year. He's playing the best football of his NFL career. And that's an offense right now that's playing pretty well, giving him chances. He's getting the job done. I feel very good about him as a running back too for the rest of the year. Travis Kelce had a big game. It just feels like at this stage of his career, this is what he is. You're going to get some great ones, some down weeks, and altogether, he'll probably end up just a solid tight end one. Definitely, I don't think will be worthy of his 25th overall draft slot, but when he gives you weeks like this, you're happy because there aren't that many tight ends who are even capable of catching 10 passes and scoring a touchdown. Larar continues to trot Aaron Rodgers out there. He was okay in this one, but 1 week above 20.7 points, that's just not going to get the job done. And I think for Larar to have a chance at winning the title, I just think he needs someone better at that position. I've felt that way pretty much all year. But, quarterback 15, he hasn't been horrendous. It's so uninspiring and unimpressive what Rodgers is doing. Good development for Larar on the bench, Jacoby Myers. He seems to be the main benefactor of Devontae Adams being traded. He's just a quality player. And he always gets targets wherever he's been. He's played in bad offenses his whole career. New England, the Raiders. He always gets targets. And Larar's going to have to count on him now. That's his wide receiver too at this point, behind Higgins. But yeah, Larar deserves credit. He deserves credit for this team with his back up against the wall this season, with the hand he was dealt with McCaffrey. Here he is, 9-7, and very much in the race, currently holding a playoff spot. Okay, Nothdurft, for once, wasn't the highest scoring team in the league. He was the second highest. Wins 147.94 against Mecca, 126.56. Weird week in the league where 4 of the top 6 scoring teams were featured in just 2 matchups. MVP, Cade Otton, 24.6 points. Talked about it last week. Nothdurft with a stroke of luck, streaming Cade Otton the week that Evans and Godwin went down, and it is looming large now. Back-to-back weeks, 10 targets, 9 receptions, 2 touchdowns in this one. I mean, he might be their number one option in that offense right now. He really might until Evans comes back. It's a big deal for Nothdurft. Tight end had been an issue for him, and suddenly he's got 2 options at the position. He's got Otton, and he's got TJ Hawkinson returning. Kyren Williams continued doing what he does. Touches, touchdowns, and a running back 1 week. And it feels like there are a few more reliable in the entire realm, in the entire game of fantasy football. How many guys are more reliable than Kyren Williams? You can count them on one hand. David Montgomery ends up with 2 touchdowns, another touchdown machine. 9 carries for 33 yards in the last 2 weeks. Pretty uninspiring stuff. Combined 18 carries for 64 yards. That's concerning, but he finds his way into the end zone. He had a rushing one in this game, and he had a passing score as well. That allowed him to put up 14.45 points. Garrett Wilson continues his high floor. And the Devontae Adams' arrival has not hurt him thus far. We'll see if that continues to be the case, but promising signs compared to what the fears were 2 weeks ago. Lamar Jackson, quarterback one, just pretty elite stuff from him right now. 25.2 or more in all but 2 games. And Ramondre Stevenson, he scored 2 touchdowns. It was an incredibly inefficient game. 20 carries for 48 yards, but he got those 2 scores. What a weird year he's had. He's got 4 games with 16 plus, and he's got 4 weeks with 6.2 or less. One of those weeks being a game that he missed. So that is a perplexing, and that's kind of what happens when you're a running back in a bad offense. It's just, if you're not scoring, it's hard to deliver. And that's what's happening. Stevenson is touchdown dependent. I don't love him rest of season, but at least you know that New England has to run their offense through him. And when they're not getting crushed and they don't have to abandon the run, he gets touches. That's the key. You want to use him in weeks where they have favorable situations where they can run the football. Yeah, we talked about that trade. So no need to go more into that, but just Josh Downs, 20.2 on the bench. He could factor in pretty largely for this team the rest of the way. Nothdurft continues to dominate this league. 13-3. Leads in points scored by a ton. Leads in record if everyone played everyone by 15 games over me. 77-11. His updated record in that, and Nothdurft has been, in a word, fantastic in 2024. We move to Mecca now, who had his best week of the season, and a team that is trending upward for sure. A team that stayed afloat and is now trending upward with 2 of its 3 best weeks coming in week 7 and 8. Cedric Tillman. This could be a big deal. Mecca got him for nothing. Did not have to spend any FAB. And here's Tillman, 21 combined targets over the last 2 weeks with Jameis Winston. 40 fantasy points. This game, he went 7 for 99 and 2. This is a real interesting one. We need to see it a few more weeks to fully be able to believe in it. But this could be a wide receiver too rest of season. We know Jameis loves slinging it around the field. We know Stefanski's offense has been fantasy friendly in the past when people not named Deshaun Watson are playing quarterback. Tillman could be a big deal down the stretch. George Kittle, it's amazing what he's done. Long a roller coaster, now as steady as they come. Double digits in all but 1 game played, and 6 touchdowns in 7 appearances. Tight end 1, averaging over 15 points per game. Elite stuff out of him, and don't really think it slows down. Might lose some work with McCaffrey coming back, and maybe he loses some touchdowns. Like, it probably comes down a bit for him, but Ayuk also being gone for the year, Kittle's going to be necessary. He's necessary to that offense. Kupp came back. He was quiet, but he did get into the end zone to salvage his fantasy day. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a very down game, but it was a day where Detroit just destroyed Tennessee. And Amon-Ra ends up with only 2 targets. How about Amon-Ra? Oddly, only over 8 targets in 1 game. But that's because the Lions really, they have not thrown the ball all that much this season. They haven't had to. And what's kept Amon Ra as a wide receiver one, as he is the wide receiver 11 on the year, 5 touchdowns already. And he had one in this game, 2 catches for 7 yards. And he was on the receiving end of that David Montgomery touchdown pass. How about Raheem Mostert getting into the end zone twice out of nowhere, out of absolutely nowhere? Uh, I mean, I guess he's going to be their goal line guy. I mean, it makes sense. He was so good along, around that area last year. He's going to get chances down there, and if Miami's offense continues to succeed, maybe Mostert can be a touchdown dependent running back too the rest of the way. That would be a big deal for Mecca. Chase Brown continues to solidify himself as a running back too. And so that position doesn't look quite as bad as it once did for Matt's team. Marvin Harrison had a very good game on the bench. And so that's a promising sign. So yeah, this team is trending up, and I don't think Matt should be counted out. He's 2 games out of a playoff spot. There are flaws, but I think he's got it in him to go on a run, especially if he could figure out the non-Chase Brown running back spot, whether it's Mostert, someone else on the bench making a trade, whatever. If he can figure that out, this team becomes pretty good pretty fast. So Matt is now 7-9 on the year. We've got 3 matchups to go still. Horvath defeats Klingman 129.3 to 81.28. Let's give the matchup MVP to Jahmyr Gibbs. You know what? Let's give it to his 3 running backs as a group. Gibbs, Taylor, and Swift, they all scored between 18.2 and 19.8. They were all just fantastic. Gibbs had a 70-yard touchdown run showing off his breakaway speed. Taylor, in his return from his ankle injury, looked as good as ever. When he's on the field, he is still so damn good. It's just a shame that these ankle injuries have hampered him the last couple of years, but hopefully he can stay right. DeAndre Swift, got to give him credit, man. Since looking like the worst running back in the NFL, he's been one of the best, right? Touchdowns 4 straight games, over 5 yards per carry in 3 of his last 4. Part of it is facing weaker rush defenses, but he's also doing a pretty damn good job himself. And explosive plays. He had a 56-yard touchdown in this game. Those are coming. And he looks like a pretty quality running back too. I don't think it stays this good for him. He's scored 18.9 or more in 4 straight. I don't think it stays that good, but I would kind of suddenly trust him right now, which is amazing for me to say. Because he's a player I've never really liked. I liked him early in his career with Detroit, but then his flaws kind of became evident. And he does some things well too. And let's give him credit where it's deserved. Njoku, another good game. He's just kind of thriving there right now, just as he did last year with Flacco. I expect him to be a strong tight end one the rest of the year. Zay Flowers had a good game, and it might be his last good game. He had scored 15 or more in 3 of his last 4. I think with Deontay coming in, it's going to be very hard to trust him. I mean, he's a good player. He'll have his time. He'll have his games. But I just don't know how you're ever going to really want to use him when I'm sure there are going to be some horrific games. There have been horrific games as is, right? Look at this. Flowers, 100 plus yard. It's just crazy to look at his season. Here's his yardage total in every week: 37, 91, 20, 10, 111, 132, 11, 115. So you've got 4 games of 91 plus, and you've got 4 games under 40 yards. And that's just kind of the product of the Ravens offense and what it is. So I think he's going to be an even more exaggerated version of that with them adding another uh, piece to their passing game. DJ Moore had a down week. What can you do? He really quietly has not been good for fantasy this year. None of those Bears pass catchers have. Moore definitely the most disappointing because he was drafted 40th overall, of course, by Dylan before he was traded. But he's scored above 11.2 one time, and that is not what you bargained for, and not what you were expecting from a guy of this caliber. But it just hasn't come together for that passing offense just yet. Horvath did kind of disgustingly have, um, the worst drop of the week, getting rid of Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, who Horvath had been riding with a couple of times. He drops him. He had scored 31.4, picks up Geno Smith, who only scores 10.2. Fortunately for Horvath, he was able to still go 2-0 on the week. Mahomes also, I mean, he didn't have a good game for fantasy. He scored 20.8, which sadly is his season high. Yeah. Still not feeling great about old Pat for the fake game. Zamir White, get him off your team. Get him off your fucking team. He has How many points does he have on the year? I got to do the math on this because I mean this is horrific. What are we doing? Why are we rostering the Raiders backup running back? He has 18.4 points on the season. Jahmyr Gibbs and DeAndre Swift both scored more points this week than Zamir White has this year. Get him off your team. Good production out of defense and kicker. They combined for 28 points. So Horvath needed a 2-0 week, got a 2-0 week, and he's got himself back in the mix now. Still a big uphill climb. He's 3 games out of a playoff spot. Realistically, probably has to finish 9-3 the rest of the way, but he's back in it. He is alive, moving down, the last 6 weeks of the regular season now. Klingman hit a big speed bump here. This was his worst week in a while, 81.28. Just nobody delivered. Nobody scored over 11.6 points. Jordan Love gets injured. That ends up being the worst sit of the week with Brock Purdy. Cost Klingman over 20 points going with Love over Purdy. What can you do? He got injured. But Purdy also had a big game, 28.6 on the bench. And then Klingman just has all these tough start-sit decisions each week. He ended up not going with Olave, went with Smith and Jigba. That cost him about 5 points. Michael Pittman's going to become interesting now with Flacco being inserted. Hopkins could become interesting, depending on what his role is in Kansas City as they get him up to speed. But yeah, just nobody else came through. Breece Hall, 9.4. That's a shame. Did anyone on Klingman's team score? I don't know that he had a single touchdown, which is remarkable if true. I'm going through everybody right now. I know this is the most captivating stuff ever. I get that. Uh No, nobody on this team. No, fuck, Evan Ingram scored. God damn you. So Klingman had one touchdown. That's crazy. That is crazy. I mean, that's just a fluke horrible week. There's not much that you can really say outside of that. Right, throw it in the trash. I don't think he's holding on to a playoff spot just by the smallest of margins. So how about this? I changed my AirPods and they disconnected for some reason. Why would I try it? Fuck technology. Fuck you, Apple. I was gonna say fuck Steve Jobs, but I'm not gonna do that. He doesn't deserve that. So yeah, Klingman loses. All right, two matchups to go. Lohan gets a win, 110.31, defeating Sam 93.04. Matchup MVP is a stunner. Kyle Pitts, 23.1. Kyle Pitts, by the way, tight end 4 on the season. It's a bit of an indictment on the position, but also Pitts has been a little better than probably given credit for by me. He's scored 8.5 or more 4 straight games, and this was his breakout performance. I think, you know, it came on 5 targets, so it's a little fluky, but Pitt showed his talent, and he had a couple of long receptions. That second touchdown was, I don't know, 49 yards out. He almost came, it was almost one of the worst plays ever because he like kind of celebrated like a sprinter at the finish line, like throwing his arms out behind him, and the ball got knocked away at the last second, I think, by Antoine Winfield. And it kind of frankly looked like he lost it before he broke the plane, but they ruled that he did barely uh, get in. So it saved him from just complete disaster. Uh, and what would have put a big damper on an otherwise great game. But yeah, Pitts ends up with the 23.1, easily the biggest performer for Lohan's team. Everyone else was just kind of solid, just did their job. Um, Pollard, Hunt, Aaron Jones all in double digits. AJ Brown had about as bad of a game as you'll see from him. 10.9, only 6 targets, only 11 targets the last 2 weeks combined. They haven't had to throw it all that much. They've gone run heavy. No touchdown, still 5 catches for 84 yards. Still, I mean, this is just a floor game for Brown. Bad game for London. It ended a great stretch. What can you do? And you know what sucks for Lohan is those two studs not coming through is what cost him a second matchup win. You needed 13 more points, and you feel like you should have gotten that out of those guys. This speaks to what Lohan's season has been. There's been some misfortune, there's been some bad start sit decisions, and then there's been shit like this where it just this team refuses to all come together in the same week. The weeks where the running backs deliver, doesn't get it from the receivers. Now you get a big game from Kyle Pitts, and you get let down by your studs. Like it's just there's a new frustrating element every week, but Lohan at least did come away with the one victory to move to 4-12. His season is still all but over. He basically needs to win out from this point. 11-1, 10-2. That's at worst what he needs to do. Sam on the losing end also basically has the roof caved in on him. Uh, he went with like an all Dolphins team this week. It didn't really work out. Um, if you're him, I don't really blame him for just saying, fuck it. Let's just do something weird and see what happens. Tua didn't have a great fantasy game. Tua also fumbled 3 or 4 times in this game. I don't know if he lost any of them. Maybe he lost one, but it was like a just, rust after, yeah, he fumbled 3 times. He didn't lose any of them, but, uh, that could have changed his line significantly for fantasy purposes. His first game back, at least he was able to get out of it healthy and played a pretty solid real life game. Tyreek Hill didn't do much. He had a very similar game to AJ Brown on the other side of the matchup, like decent production, but no score. And he ended up just saying, it was all right. Devon Acham was great. That was the one Dolphin who did come to play for Sam. He got that receiving work back. And that's what was that's what was working for him with Tua. First 2 weeks, 7 for 76, 7 for 69. Those were his receiving lines. This week, 6 for 50. And when you look at it, the 4 weeks in between, Achan had a combined 49 yards receiving. So that was not happening with Tua out. He comes back in, and they're using him in the receiving game again, which is where he really is a weapon. And that's what makes him so valuable for fantasy. So Achan, you feel great about as long as he can stay on the field. Should be a running back one and a high end one the rest of the year. Jonnu Smith did nothing. Christian Kirk, who's now out for the year, did nothing. Jerry Jeudy was fine. And then Sam did start an inactive Rico Dowdle. He got ruled out late. I don't really blame Sam for not being on top of his app at 7:30 when those inactives were released, and it's not like it would have mattered anyway. He would have put Devin Singletary in, and he would have gotten 3 points. So all in all, who really gives a damn about that situation? That was a weird fucking thing with Dowdle too. He showed up to the stadium sick. What was that? Very strange stuff. No one, the Dallas beat reporters were really confused by it, and the Cowboys could have used him in this game, but something was going on there with him. So yeah, Sam's obviously, he's in big trouble here, and now see what he could put together the rest of the way. See if Tyreek Hill can get going, and there were some nice signs of life on the bench. Kyler Murray and Sam Laporta both performed. And Laporta did see 6 targets in a game where they didn't throw the ball very much. So maybe with Jameson Williams out, his role is growing a little bit. That's all you can hope for. We move on to the last matchup. And how about me? I stuck to what I said. I said I was going to fly, and I have been damn efficient here with these matchups over the last probably 45 minutes or so. The final matchup was a brutal one. There's a brutal matchup every week, it seems like. This week, that mantle goes to Krieger 95.8, defeating Dylan 73.07. Matchup MVP is Josh Jacobs, 25 points. After Love went out, they really rode him. He ended up with 26 touches in this game, 2 touchdowns. The touchdowns are coming. He had none through 4 weeks. He now has 4 over his last 4 games. So the touchdowns have arrived, and Jacobs he's definitely cementing himself as a low-end running back one. Terry McLaurin, quality performance, and it's just been quality performance after quality performance for Terry. He has not scored in single digits since week 2. And right now he's about as steady of a wide receiver, like low end 1, high end 2 as you could find. And Who's to say it won't keep going with the way that he's playing, with the way that Daniels is playing, with the way Washington in general has been playing. So he's been some great stuff. A guy similar to DeAndre Swift, who I was starting. It's not the same because Swift I don't really believe in as a player. McLaurin I've always believed in as a player, but I was just starting to like lose faith in him from a fantasy perspective. But he's really put it together, and as a sixth round pick, nice value for Krieger. No one else on this team really did much of anything. Joe Burrow had a down game, and Joe Burrow, when you look back on it now, he's got 2 weeks over 21.9. It's just classic pocket passer stuff where you need them to have those huge weeks, touchdowns or yards. And if they don't do that, it just kind of ends up being meh, right? Uh, 5 of 8 games, Burrow's under 20 points this year. Deebo Samuel had a weird game, came into it. Amazing he played in this game, right? He had been hospitalized earlier in the week with, I think, pneumonia. And he's able to play, which was impressive as hell. And then he was discharged from the hospital on Tuesday. Fucking awesome. Played in this game, but then and you know what? He got off to a great start too. I thought, maybe he's going to be like a decoy. No, they were going to him early and often, and he could have had a huge game here. He had a long touchdown that got called back. Um, yeah, it was a 66-yard touchdown called back on a holding penalty. But then sadly, he did get banged up. He ended up with rib and oblique strains per Kyle Shanahan, and now he's day to day. They do have their bye, so hopefully he'll be back out of the bye. But this is kind of like slowly turning into a nightmare season for Deebo, who's the wide receiver 24, and who from week 3 onward has a missed game, a game he played in where he like immediately left, so got you 0, a week where he got 2.5, 8.7, 10.6. So what's that? 5 of the last 6 weeks, 10.6 or less. I think he could be really good in the second half of the season with Ayuk gone. But you just wonder if all of the injuries over the years have maybe added up and taken their toll. I hope that's not the case because I love watching this guy. I just worry that it might be. But here's to hoping that that's not true and that he can get right over the bye week and deliver a strong second half of the season. Rest of the team was bad. Brock Bowers, sadly, trapped in that Vegas offense. This guy, he leads the NFL in receptions. As a rookie tight end, he leads the NFL in receptions. He is a stud, but he's trapped in a shithole offense. Only the one touchdown. And while he's still a very strong tight end one, it's keeping him from being like, blowing your mind. Because it's just hard to have those big games when you're not getting into the end zone. 5 targets, also a shame. I'd imagine Kansas City did all they could to take him out of the game. They have the personnel and the scheme to be able to do that. Javonte Williams, yeah, such a good spot for him, right? He had that huge game against New Orleans. You're thinking like, wow, here we go. Facing Carolina, and he lays an egg, 17 for 44. And just I don't think you could ever really trust him, but who knows? And then Jordan Mason, man, did that become a fucking disaster over the last few weeks. He was through 2 weeks, it was like, wow, like this guy is going to win people leagues. McCaffrey's never going to play again. Mason is awesome. Fuck yeah. And then from week 3 onward, he topped single digits once. And this was a combination of not getting into the end zone, of getting banged up. He got injured in week 6. He got through the game in week 7, okay. But then in week 8, that shoulder injury flared back up on him. And now, Isaac Guerrero has come in and looked good. McCaffrey's coming back, and you wonder, is Mason going to do a single relevant thing the rest of the way? I think it's possible he won't. We'll see with McCaffrey. Everything I've read is he is a very high re-injury risk. But yeah, this became disappointing for Mason in a hurry. And when you look at it from Krieger's perspective, he really didn't get to experience much of the good. He had that 23-point week out of him in week 4, and then just this misery of the last month. So what can you do? At least for Krieger now, he's got that immediate plug-in of Alvin Kamara. He's got Jacobs, Kamara, White. You got McLaurin, Debo, Keon Coleman looks interesting. Krieger definitely has the guys still. And he's 8-8. He came away with a big win here, big one in 1 week, despite scoring under 100 points. I still think this team makes the playoffs. Currently sitting 1 game out. Dylan loses here, and just real bad week. What can you say? Stroud at 15.25, who Dylan has cut bait on. He is done with Stroud, which is a little wild to me. I don't really blame him because, when you have a guy like this, you never really want to sit them. And so you almost have to make this decision where it's like, you know what? I don't want to play you anymore. And so I'm just going to drop you and just move on and not have to deal with it. The only thing is, I would have waited until Nico Collins came back to see if he could get something going. But it's not like, it's crazy. Like, you look at it, even when Collins was healthy and performing, Stroud had 16.9 in week 2, 11.95 in week 3. Like, it's not like he was amazing then. He was hit or miss then. And yeah, it's just the same shit as Burrow, except he has as low of a floor as Burrow, and his ceiling hasn't been as high to this point this year. I'm sure it was not easy to drop. Well, knowing Dylan, it probably was easy because he probably just said, fuck this guy, I'm done with him. But it's tough to drop your 5th-round pick. And then, yeah, I mean, just nobody else really did anything, right? Saquon had those touchdowns vultured from him, had a couple of opportunities, couldn't get in. And Saquon now, 12.6 or less, 3 of his last 4 games. He doesn't have a touchdown in any of those 3 games where he has 12.6 or less. And this is where you run into some issues with him, is on these days where the touchdowns are going to Hurts. It hurts Barkley. It hurts Barkley when Hurts scores. Devontae Adams hasn't done shit in 2 games with Rodgers. Combined 84 yards receiving. Give them a little bit more time to see if they can get going, but they face tough. You face the Steelers, and then you face the Patriots with Christian Gonzalez, who is truly one of the elite shutdown corners. And I'm sure he shadowed. Well, maybe he didn't. They might have moved. Who knows what they did? because you have Garrett Wilson as well. And it's not like I watched any of that sewage. Um, but I'm sure Adam saw some Gonzalez in that game. Tank Dell scored after an awful interception from Anthony Richardson that cost the Colts the game and the division and him his starting job. So Dell scored. Hunter Henry, kind of sucks for him that Drake May went out after the first quarter. They were looking good. That May was playing great. Henry and May have a nice connection, and then Drake goes out and Henry ends up with a quiet game. Waddle didn't do anything in the first game back with Tua. Waddle doesn't have over 46 yards receiving since week 1. Nick Chubb, nothing. The only positive for Dylan's team is that Puka Nacua came back and looked amazing. Similar to Debo, I thought he's just going to be a decoy and then just getting force fed right out of the gate. And he was clearly not at 100% and still performing. So I think if you're Dylan, you got to feel really good about Nacua the rest of the way as a wide receiver 1. And then you just need, you need Barkley to be himself. You just need one of these fucks, like one of Adams, Waddle, Dell. You need one of them to live up to the mid-tier wide receiver 2 that you were hoping all of these guys would be. One of them, at least one of them needs to be that. Honestly, probably 2 of them, but at least one. And so time will tell, but Dylan's in a bad spot now. 6-10. He's actually in last place in points scored for the season. 3 games out of a playoff spot. And it's not going to be easy to overcome this, but things could change quickly. You end up with a 2-0 week this week, and it's a much different conversation in 7 days. What else do we fucking gotta do here? What do we gotta do? Oh yeah. Fab. I don't give a fuck. I'm not doing it. The only notable thing that happened, there were 2 notable things. One was already touched on, and that was Mecca getting Cedric Tillman for nothing. That's a big deal and potentially a huge miss by the rest of the league. Mecca also got Jawan Jennings for a hefty bid of 17. I thought that Jennings, interestingly enough, I was going to bid 18. And then I decided, no. I was like, I don't think Jennings is going to play this week. Then they go on bye. And by that point, I thought maybe Pearsall establishes himself. McCaffrey will be back. I just decided I don't really want to spend that much on something like that. But Jennings could still be very important. So Mecca gets those 2 receivers. That's the one, big thing that happened. And then Nothdurft getting Keon Coleman and then, of course, trading him. That was a part of that trade package. So those were the 2 big moves of FAB a week ago. Do a quick little FAB update. Budget. Larar leads with 100. Larar is going to be able to do some interesting things late in the year. He's going to have a huge advantage when he decides to start spending this at some point, if he does. And then you got Klingman with 80. He's also, another team in the playoff race that's got a significant amount socked away. Because everybody else, all the other playoff hopefuls are at 50 or less. I'm at 51, Nothdurft 44, Andrew 48, Mecca 15, Krieger 2. So Larar and Klingman have a big edge on the field. Horvath is at 73 if he ends up working his way back into the mix. Power rankings. Nordif is 1, I'm 2. Peter is 3. That stays the same from a week ago. Larar and Klingman flip spots. So Larar from 5 to 4, Klingman from 4 to 5. Andrew is the big winner of the week. So what happens when you score 170 points? And, the league is as bunched in the middle as it is. Andrew jumps 3 spots from 9 to 6. Krieger, goes back 1, 6 to 7. I still prefer Krieger's team to Andrew's, but got to give Andrew some respect for that was the highest scoring week of the season and one of the best weeks in league history. So let's give him. We like piling on Andrew. Let's give him credit where it's deserved too. Horvath jumps 2 spots from 10 to 8. Mecca does as well from 11 to 9. And then the guys who dropped, Lohan goes from 8 to 10. At some point, that potential, it needs to be delivered on. And right now, it just is not. And so he finally had to drop. Dylan tanks from 7 to 11. And then Sam stays as the 12th ranked team in the power rankings. Let's look ahead to week 9. The matchup of the week is Colin against Krieger. This is a big one this is currently the 6th. The final team in the playoff spots, Klingman, against the first team out in Krieger. This is a big deal. This could loom very large at the end of the season for who's in, who's out. We might look back on that matchup as being one of the determining moments. We've also got another big matchup between Andrew and Horvath. Andrew, holding on to a playoff spot right now, but Horvath is charging and in need of another good week. Certainly in need of a 1-1 week, and you would love for a 2-0 if you're Dave. He's got his team at full strength. Outside of that, we got myself taking on Mecca. Huge week for Matt, who, like Horvath, needs at least a 1-1 and hoping for a 2-0. I'm looking to keep, stockpiling wins while I can before buys are going to crush me weeks 11, 12, and 14. I've got some bad shit upcoming, so I need to try to put myself in a good position while I can because I don't know how those weeks are going to pan out. We've got Larar against Dylan. Dylan catching Larar at a very good time. Obviously, Diggs is gone. Harris, Najee is on bye. McCaffrey is on bye. Higgins might not play. And Dylan is in a spot here where he could keep his season alive. And it would also be a pretty big blow to Larar to lose this one. And then we got a nice Peter taking on Lohan. Big spot for Peter and Lohan, looking for that 2-0 week. And then Nordif against Sam, the top team against the bottom team in the league. So we'll see how things go in week number 9. This next recap will be the mid-season recap with the mid-season awards. And likely we'll be doing it on Wednesday again because Tuesday is election night, and I always like watching that coverage. Maybe I'll do it. Who the fuck knows? Who knows? Yeah, it'll either go back to its regularly scheduled Tuesday or I'll do it Wednesday for the second consecutive week. But it's going to do it for me here. This ended up being not horrifically long. And all I can say is, the Yankees have just damaged my soul. Not so much this year's team, but tonight really showed me the damage they've done to me because I felt numb to what was an atrocious loss. And that's bad. But hey, it's fully on to football now. Baseball is done. Don't have to think about it for a few months. And now I get to enjoy the Joe Flacco era of the Indianapolis Colts. But hey, take care to everybody. I wish all of you well. Even Dylan, I even wish you well because you need some well wishes with what the Yankees did to your psyche. So even you, I hope, has a good week. Um, but yeah, that'll do it for me. I'm gonna go and hey, have a great one.